all the engines on the island of Sodor look forward to Harvest Festival time. But most of all, they look forward to Sir Topham Hatt's Harvest Firework display. Sir Topham Hatt came to see Thomas and James. James was overjoyed. Thomas wasn't happy at all. Thomas pouted. James steamed proudly across the countryside. He hummed happily to himself. He was having a wonderful day. Thomas was still upset when he arrived at the shunting yards. He grouched, and he biffed the troublesome trucks crossly around the yard. When James arrived at the depot, he was very excited. The freight cars were all ready for him, filled safely to the top with fireworks. James was coupled up with the precious cargo, and he steamed away. Thomas shunted the last truck crossly into place. The troublesome trucks were glad that job was finished. James happily steamed along. He was thinking about the fireworks. He was imagining all the sparkles, flashes, and shooting stars when suddenly there was a loud noise. James ground to a halt. Said his driver. Thomas puffed back into Narrator station as Gordon was laying off his passengers. Children and grown-ups from all over the island had come to see the fireworks. Seeing the children cheered Thomas up, but Sir Topham Hatt looked concerned. He said, cried Thomas, and he set off to collect James. Thomas puffed across the countryside. Even with his light on, Thomas knew he had to be very careful. Thomas found James broken down on the track. Teased Thomas. James was upset. But when Thomas got behind James, he couldn't see ahead. Said Thomas. James was cross. He pouted. Puffed Thomas. James didn't want the children to be sad, so he agreed to look out for Thomas, and they set off together. When the track was straight and clear, James called out. And Thomas did. They were soon working happily together, and making good time. Sir Topham Hatt checked his watch. There was still no sign of Thomas or James. He thought. Even Gordon was worried. Said Sir Topham Hatt. So the disappointed children started to board the coaches. At last they could see the signal lights. The signal had turned red. Thomas and James stopped. Puzzled James. Puffed Thomas. Cried James. Thomas and James were very upset. They cried, and sounded their whistles as loudly as they could. But no one could hear them. The children were all on board. Gordon was ready to depart. Then Thomas had a bright idea. He told his driver. So his driver carefully lit a rocket. He stood well back as it whooshed into the sky. The rocket burst into stars. Cried Sir Topham Hatt. He said, the junction signal turned to green, and Thomas and James were soon on their way. James and Thomas were soon at the station. The children cheered. Cried James happily. Agreed Thomas. Boomed Sir Topham Hatt. That night, Thomas and James watched the fireworks together. Said James proudly. Puffed Thomas.